Good morning, everyone. It's Barry Donovan here from INEX and the IXP Manager project. Today I'm recording a new video about how to install IXP Manager version 7 using the automated installation script. So as I record this, we're on the cusp of releasing version 7, finally. And I'm just now preparing some of the materials, such as this video and a couple of other videos to do with IXP Manager version 7. So let me just orientate us with the IXP Manager website on ixpmanager.org. As many of you know at this stage, INEX is IXP Manager's core team and founder. So I'm here with INEX, and I just want to give a particular shout out before we start to some of our sponsors. We have a number of internet exchanges sponsor IXP Manager, which has allowed us to employ full-time developers over the last couple of years, or last few years, many years. And in a particular welcome to the Berlin Commercial Internet Exchange, which have joined us last year, and also the Norwegian Internet Exchange, which were an original sponsor many years ago, but they've come back this time as a gold sponsor, which is great. We also have two patrons which deserve a big mention. The Internet Society has sponsored us for many years, and APNIC has been a diamond sponsor for a number of years now, so they've contributed quite a lot. Patrons are not IXPs, but they're organizations or foundations that work for the good of the internet. So a particular thank you to all of them. So as I said, we're talking about installing IXP Manager using the automated script, and the place to go for that is the installation tab on the website. And there's two ways of installing IXP Manager: via the automated scripts or via manual installation. So what I'm doing now is recording videos to replace these. So these date from about 3 or 4 years ago to do with version 6, and this is now going to be for version 7. There's a link on this page to bring you to the documentation, but I'm actually just going to go to the documentation page directly. So that's IXP Manager version 7. You can see we've versioned documentations now, which is a new improvement. And all of the documentations are on docs.ixpmanager.org. And we're going to go to installation and automated script. So that's where that link would have brought you from the main website. Now there's very little on this, and that's because there is actually very little to installing IXP Manager using the automated script. And what we do is we just click on this link here, which brings us to the installer. And that's a link directly to GitHub. This is the installation script here. We'll come back to that in a little while. So a little note on the IXP Manager installation scripts, and particularly the steps involved in installing V7 on Ubuntu 24.04. We prepare a virtual machine, we attach Ubuntu ISO, we boot it, we follow the Ubuntu's installation process, we make sure to include SSH, we complete the installation and reboot, and once it's booted back up, we just run these 3 commands. And that's it. You'll have IXP Manager installed and ready to go. And that's exactly what we're going to do here now in this video. So let me start by talking about hypervisors. So, in production, INEX uses something called XCP-ng as our hypervisor, which is a fork from Zen which was a Citrix product. You could use VMware if you've got bundles of cache, and there's many other options available. On your desktop or laptop, you might use Vagrant. Sorry, not Vagrant. Vagrant is a virtualization tool that we use for something else. You might use VirtualBox, or you might use Parallels, for example. Parallels is what I use. Parallels is a commercial hypervisor for Macs, and it's particularly good because it has a lot of excellent tie-ins that make Windows work seamlessly with Mac OS if you need to run some Windows applications. I find myself having less and less need for that now than I used to have. But it also works very well for ARM. So all of this is ARM. That's a Windows ARM installation. This is a Ubuntu ARM installation for a different video. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a new virtual machine. I'm going to install Windows, Linux, or Mac OS from an image file. Okay, so I'm going to continue with that one. Now, Parallels already found this ISO file in my downloads folder. You can see it's in my downloads folder there in the pop-up. I got that from Ubuntu's website, ubuntu.com. I went to products and Ubuntu server, and I went to download Ubuntu server. Now you can download the the AMD 64 version just by clicking this. But if you want alternative architectures, as I did for my ARM, I came down to here. So I downloaded the ARM version. I just downloaded this ISO. It's quite large, but I just downloaded it directly from the website. So that's what Parallels has found. It's found that download. So I'm going to continue with that. I'm going to call this IXP Manager 7 Auto Install Demo. And I want to customize the settings before installation, just so I can talk about some things that you might consider in production. Okay, so here's my options for hardware. So CPU and memory. Parallels by default is giving me 2 cores and 4 gigs of RAM. That would be more than sufficient in production for any small or small medium-sized IXP. You know, up to 80 or 100 members, no problem with that. As you go beyond that, you might want to start looking at 4 cores and 8 gigs maybe. But you know, it depends also what you're running on the IXP Manager virtual machine. If you're doing your graphing collections on a different virtual machine, you're going to need less resources on the IXP Manager virtual machine. So you can scale it as you need to. You know, it's going to be a virtual machine. If you find yourself using a lot of memory, increase the memory. If you find you need some more cores, add some more cores. In terms of networking, I'm just going to bridge just to my local adapter here, but in production, you're going to consider probably 3 interfaces. The first interface you're going to consider is a connection to your internal management network. So that's where you might be using some private IP addresses. Is where your servers might communicate with each other on an internal private network. It's where you might run backups. It's where you might run Nagios checks on MySQL and stuff like that. It's where you might SSH the IXP Manager server from a jump box and so on. So you might have this internal private management network interface. You'll probably have a public network interface. You know, that'll come with a public IP address that will be firewalled with IP tables and or some kind of firewall device in front of it. It's where you're going to run IXP Manager on, you know, HTTPS port 443, so you and your members can log into it and interact with IXP Manager. And then the last interface you might consider is a connection to your production peering network. And the reason you might have a connection to that is if, for example, you want to run smoke ping on the IXP Manager server, it's going to need an IP address on that peering network so it can do those smoke ping tests to all of your member IP addresses. In version 7, we're introducing a new diagnostics functionality. We don't include connectivity tests in v7.0, but we're going to be adding that soon. And in that situation, you may also want an interface on your peering LAN. Don't worry, if you don't want your IXP Manager box connected to your peering LAN, we'll have a way of doing those diagnostic tests through a different server as well. So they're the 3 interfaces that you might consider. And then lastly is going to be the hard drive. Parallels is giving me 64 gigs here. Again, that would be perfect for small or small medium-sized IXP. During the install process, I'm going to tell you about how we use LVM, so you can add space in real time without having to take your server offline. So so you don't need to fret too much. Just make sure you've enough to get you going for you know, the first year or so. If you're only going to run IXP Manager on this box, not graphing or anything else, 20 gigs is probably loads. Okay, so that extra space is going to be if you want to add more services and stuff. So I'm just going to leave this at 64 and continue on. So what Parallels is doing now is it's building that virtual machine and it's going to start booting it up. Sometimes Parallels boots it up into the installer. Sometimes you might see some of the boot process as it goes on. But essentially what we're doing now is we're waiting for the install ISO grub timeout to pass. So on other hypervisors, you might see a lot of this already. Parallels just for some reason isn't showing us the initial screens on a fresh install. Okay, here we are. Parallels brought us straight into Ubuntu's installation process. So I'm going to pick British English, and I'm going to pick my variant as Macintosh, so all my keys work as expected. Now I'm going to install a minimal server, which comes with as small a footprint as possible because our installation script is going to install everything IXP Manager needs. And if you find that you need anything else, you can just apt install it after that. But it's best to start with as small a footprint as possible, minimal set of packages. As I say, the script will install everything we need, and anything else you need, you can just install yourself thereafter. Now, the next bit is the network setup configuration. So we've already discussed the interfaces that you might consider. I'm just going on a local network here, just making a note of the IP address. No proxy required, and this is just apt updating, checking the mirrors. That's done there. So now we're on the hard drive partitioning, and this is what I'm going to do manually, so I can talk you through again some production choices you might make, especially around things like LVM. So I have a 64 gigabyte hard drive, and first thing I want to do here is add a boot partition that's 1 gig in size. So as I said, I'm going to use LVM for everything, but that's everything except the boot partition. You can put the boot partition in LVM, but I found that when LVM goes wrong, having the boot partition inside it can just make the recovery so much more difficult. So with the rest of the space, I'm just going to add an empty unformatted partition. And then I'm going to create a volume group with all of that space. So it's going to be VG0. I see no reason to change it. It's going to be that new partition 3, all of that 62 gigs nearly, and create that. So I've now got my logical volume, and inside in that I need to create some logical disks. Okay. So here I go. Sorry, I kind of messed up the terminology there. What I've created is a volume group. So that is a volume that can group a bunch of logical volumes. A logical volume is essentially a partition. So I created my volume group of 62 gigs of RAM, or 62 gigs of space. And inside in that now, I'm going to create some logical volumes. So the first logical volume I'm going to create is going to be a swap partition. So I'm going to call that swap. I'm going to give it 4 gigs and call it swap. Okay, so that's sort of for the memory overflow. Now, the reason we use LVM is if I have a partition that's filling up and I need more space, what I can do with my virtual machine is I can add a second virtual hard drive to the virtual machine. And then within the virtual machine, I can extend the volume group across that new disk. So I can, if I add a second 64 gig partition, for example, I can make the volume group twice as big. And then I can increase the size of any or all of the logical volumes as I require. And then I can use a command like resize to ext, for example, which would allow me to grow the disk online without causing any interruption. So I can do all of that in real time without a maintenance window. If you don't really know what I'm talking about and you ever come across this as a problem, you need to grow your space and you've used LVM, just drop us a note in the mailing list and we can give you some examples of some commands. So I've got my swap partition, I've got my boot partition, and now I need to create a couple of more partitions. So the next partition I'm going to create is going to be for /s or v, and that's where I'm going to install IXP Manager. I'm going to give it 20 gigs of space, which is going to be loads. Of the 37 I've left, I'm going to create another logical volume, and that's going to be for /var. I'm going to give that 25 gigs. Again, that's going to be loads. And then with the 13 gig I've got left, I'm going to make that my root partition. So there's my partitioning scheme now. I got my root partition, 13 gigs. I got /serve, I got /var, I've got my swap, and I've got my boot. If you're looking at some Linux hardening documents, they might tell you should have /var/log, /var/lib, /user/home. You can go really down the rabbit hole on this, but I think these ones are a good enough compromise for a production system. So I'm going to continue here. Create your user with whatever your own ISMS policies require you to do. I'm just going to call everything IXPM here to get me started. I'm not going to enable Ubuntu Pro because that's a commercial offering. I am going to install an SSH server, and just to make life easy, I'm going to install my SSH key from GitHub. Let's see how that works in a minute. I'm not going to install any additional packages. So now Ubuntu is installing the system. This shouldn't take too long, but I'll just pause it while it finishes that off. Okay, you can now see installation complete up here, and it's offering me the option to reboot now, which I'm going to take. So now it's going to eject the ISO CD and it's going to reboot the system. Now, at this point, I've had to restart this video a couple of times because I ran into little problems. So what I've done already at this exact point, I've cloned the virtual machine. And that's why when you look at my parallels here, you can see this manual demo. That's a clone of this at this exact point. And I'm going to start the manual installation video at this point. So if I've directed you from the manual install video to this video, this is as far as you need to watch, and now you can switch back to the manual video. So we've booted up. Everything is IXPM. And if I do a cat etc lsb, you can see it's Ubuntu 24.03 and point release is .3. So it's actually, that was only released I think very recently, so it's right up to date. If I just do an IP address, you can see I get my local address .76, perfect. So what I've done here, if I go back to GitHub and the installer information, I prepared my virtual machine. I inserted the latest ISO for 2404. I followed Ubuntu's installer. I did install SSH. I completed the installation and I rebooted. And that's where I am now. So when your new server has rebooted, you can log in. So I'm going to log in using my terminal here, just because it's much more pleasant using the terminal than using the Parallels, KVM system. So I'm going to SSH IXPM at 192.168.140.76. And you can see I'm straight in, okay? Because I downloaded my SSH key from Ubuntu. I'm going to log in here as well. I'm going to switch to root. So I'm logging in twice, and the reason I'm logging in twice is I'm going to want to follow some logs during the install process on this second window. Go back to my first window where I've just logged in, and if I flick over to GitHub, so when your new server has rebooted, log in and change to the root user. Okay, no problem. Oh, sorry. Sudo su dash. So here I am as the root user. Clear the screen, start fresh. Download and install the installation script. So that is a link to this script right here. Okay, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to pause for 1 second because I can see this is 17 hours ago and I know I made a change an hour ago. So just give me 1 second. And I'm back. Apologies for that. You can see now it's updated 22 minutes ago. That's one of the reasons I had to restart this, as I found a little bug. So this is a script that we're going to download using this command here. So back to my shell. And if I do an ls-la, I can see that I've downloaded that script. Now, the next instruction, only three instructions, sudo su wget, and then run the script. So obviously you should be very wary about downloading a bash script and running it. Now you can, because it's open source project, you can see exactly what's in that script. It really is just how you install IXP Manager. And it is quite long, but a huge amount of it is about getting some user information from line 162 all the way down to line 271, so over 100 lines there. And then there's another couple of hundred lines on a configuration file. So all of this here is creating a configuration file. So it is a long script, but a lot of it is gathering information, configuration files and stuff like that. So just to pop back, if you're happy to run the script, then what you do is you just run it like this. So I'm going to run that script here. It doesn't like something in the script. So this of course shouldn't happen, but I'm going to fix this in real time just to I don't want to restart this video, so I'm just going to fix this in real time. And let me just pause it for a second. Okay, sorry about that. As I said, I didn't want to restart it. I added some ASCII art in my last commit, which for some reason I didn't like. So I've just removed the ASCII art, and I'm going to run the script again. So here we go. Here's the IXP Manager installation script. You're very welcome. It's for installing on IXP Manager. It's for installing IXP Manager version 7 on Ubuntu 24.04 only. Okay, should only be run on a newly installed Ubuntu system. And if you want to follow the progress, open a new session as root and run this. So that's why I opened a second window here. So I'm going to tail that back to my first page, press return to continue. So the first thing it's doing is an apt update and an apt upgrade. This will actually be very quick because, as I said, this is a Ubuntu 24.04.3 release, which is very, very recent. So I think there's only 2 packages that it actually upgrades. So it's done its full system upgrade. We now need to gather some information for your IXP essentially. So these details can all be changed later. Just hitting enter will set defaults. So I'm just going to say, for example, let's say I want to open an exchange in my hometown of Cork. My short name of that might be Kicks. Your AS number is the AS number of the management side of your IXP. So not your root servers, but perhaps you have a /24 or more for hosting your own infrastructure, which you have an AS number for. Maybe it's going to be your root collector. So whatever it is, that is the AS number that we're looking for here. I haven't considered if it's critical to have one or not, but you can certainly try just using a private AS number to get started. But you should be running root collectors really. In that case, you should have an AS number. You know, and it can be a 32-bit AS number. No issue with that. So I just pressed enter to default that, and I'm going to be pressing enter some more. So I'm just going to accept this as the email address for my IXP. I'm going to accept this as the phone number for my IXP, and I'm going to accept this as the website for my IXP. Now what it wants is details for the first user, the first administrative user. So I'm going to accept Joe Blogs. I'm going to accept that email address. I'm going to accept that as my preferred username. So what's going to happen now in the background is IXP Manager is going to start installing the LAMP stack. So you can see here it's installing PHP, Apache, MySQL, etc. Please be very patient. I'm running this on a very fast laptop. So the virtual machine itself is very fast, and I've got a very fast internet connection. So this all runs really, really quickly. What it's installing, you can see on the second tab where I'm tailing those logs, is the LAMP stack. So the Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP. So you can see Apache, you can see the MySQL stuff, and you can see the PHP stuff. You can run it on any Linux or Unix system, no problem. What is absolutely required is MySQL 8.x and PHP 8.4. So they're not interchangeable. You can use Apache, you can use Nginx, you can do like HTTPD if you like. You can run it on FreeBSD if you like. You can run Debian, CentOS. We run it on Ubuntu 24.04, which is what we build everything around. So as I say, the main bits are you have to be PHP 8.4. It has to be MySQL. So a lot's happened there while I was talking. Let me go back up to where we were. So we're installing PHP, Apache, MySQL. We cloned the IXP Manager GitHub repository. If we scroll down past all of this, let's see if we can see any of this. So all of this installation, here we go. A lot of setups. Okay. So here we go. We cloned into Server IXP Manager. We switched to the release version 7 branch. We created the configuration file. Right, so you can see the information I entered has been jammed in there. Here's a big long configuration file. As we go on down. Okay, we installed all of the PHP dependencies. So that's what's happening here. So that was cloning it. We created the database and the database users. We created .env file. We saw that. We installed all of the PHP dependencies. We ran composer install. We generated an application key. That's just a key that exists in the .env configuration file, and it's used for things like encrypting cookies and stuff like that. We set up the IXP Manager database. Can we see that here, I wonder? Here we go. We ran the migrations. so all the way up. We created the initial database entities. So here's IXP Manager Setup Wizard, which was a contribution we received for version 7. Here's the information we entered above. And then this is all of the settings that we have installed with by default. In particular, you can see our admin password that was created by the system. We seeded the database, we set up Apache, and then we've got this congratulations message. So your new IXP Manager installation can be accessed at this URL. We'll check that in a second. In fact, we'll do it now. We'll go straight there. So open a new browser window, paste in the URL. Okay, great. Kicks IXP Manager. Looks good so far. You can ignore this. I haven't stamped it yet. So the only reason I haven't stamped it is I don't want to stamp it until it's actually at release point. So that'll be version 7.0.0 at release. So jblogs, and this is my password. So let's see if that works. Brilliant. One of the things that we're doing in IXP Manager version 7 is we are mandating 2FA by default. You can change that, but of course we certainly wouldn't recommend you do it. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to just scan. I'm going to scan that code and see that it works. Okay, so scan that in. I think I still have my password in my paste buffer, and brilliant. There I am, 2FA successfully enabled, and I'm logged into IXP Manager. Brilliant. What else did this have to say to me? During the installation, we also installed MySQL and set the root password to this. If you plan to use this in production, you should edit serve ixpmanager.m file. So that's the master configuration file. Let's just take a quick look at that for a second. So I'm going to just go over to this window, cd/serve IXP Manager. So this is the installation. I'm going to joe.env. So there's the app key I mentioned. You can set your time zone. Here's the database connection information. Here's, my Kicks IXP Manager name, my Cork Internet Exchange. So all that kind of information is here. I'm going to Control C out of that. One of the new features in IXP Manager version 7 is we have this new settings. This new settings option under IXP Utilities. And this is a front end for that .m file. So under my IXP identity, I can change a lot of these parameters myself. Okay, so rather than having to edit the file directly, you now get to do a lot of this in the front end. Not every configuration option is on the front end yet, but the most popular ones are. So that makes that much easier. What else was it saying to me? Secure your server with an IP tables firewall. Absolutely. And if you're putting in a public IP address, make sure you have IP tables or a firewall in front of it. Use Let's Encrypt and make sure you're using HTTPS only. Complete an installation of the many features of IXP Manager, such as root server generation, member stats, etc., etc. These are all documented at this URL. Let's just take this URL, paste it in here. So here's your essential steps to set up IXP Manager. So it talks you through all of the things you should now do, plus a feature checklist to make sure that you're using IXP Manager to its fullest extent. So there are your next steps. And please tell us, please go here and submit your IXP and let us know you're using it so that we can add you to the user list and most importantly to our world map of IXP Manager users. Now, if you're happy the install successfully completed, you should remove this file. What's in this file? Just the settings we used, but in particular, you can see that we've got the 3 passwords written in there. So that's the root password for MySQL. That's IXP Manager's user password for MySQL. And this is the admin password we created for jblogs. So you should record those if you need to, and then remove that file. And then the last step is a copy of this message with passwords can be found under root. So let's cd to root, ls-la. So here it is. It's read-only to root. And that's that message with that information, okay? The only password that's not here is the IXP Manager MySQL password, but that's in the .m file. So that's it. You have successfully installed IXP Manager version 7 using the automated script. So again, please follow the next steps and let us know you use it, and any feedback, we're very happy to receive it. Thank you very much.